Dear colleagues, let's start our meeting. And today we have, I guess, very interesting presentation of Валентин Войтенков. You can see the topic of this presentation. Valentin, the screen is yours.
Olga Antonovna, thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today I would like to present to you my research on the topic impact of the crisis on household consumption patterns and analysis of Russian regions. Okay, I think it works. On the slide you can see the share of household consumption expenditures in GDP. So we can see that during each crisis, this share reducing significantly. Therefore, we consider three crises at once: global financial crisis, economic crisis of 2014, and COVID-19 pandemic. Such aggregate analysis, unfortunately, does not provide insights into how the categories of product and services are redistributed across different product and services categories. So let's move on to the motivation of the research, and the main thing is that the crises are very different in terms of their characteristics, nature of occurrence, geography, and crisis outcomes. The second aspect is that the response of households are very different to the external shocks, and the reason for this is that diverse in terms of individual characteristics that we also capture in our analysis. And the third aspect in that Russian regions are highly diverse in the economic development, so it's necessary to take this heterogeneity into account and analyze regional level data and include regional dummy variables. So as for research question, we compare the impact of 2008, 2014, and 2020 crisis on the structure of household consumption in Russian regions. To do so, we test several hypotheses, and the first one is about the asymmetric impact of the crisis on the structure of household consumption. The second hypothesis is about the presence of some recovery dynamics, which is defined as a return to previous consumption habits. And the third hypothesis is about statistically significant change in the structure of consumption under each crisis. The literature review mainly consists of the three parts: the review of empirical studies on the impact of crisis on the slide, on the return to previous consumption patterns, and a theoretical overview consisting of microeconomic literature. So studies on the impact of crisis mainly use statistical method that does not take into account the individual factors that are very important for defining the consumption structure. We basically fill the literature gap by combination of statistical methods and quantitative methods. Studies on the return to the consumption habits are more methodologically advanced and often focus on the specific country or specific crisis. So here is a very interesting result that households almost all around the world are unwilling to return to previous consumption habits, with Russia being exception. So Berdneva and Ratnikova find that demand characteristics of Russian households recovered after the food embargo. This paper also examined the presence of recovery dynamics in the consumption habits. So additionally to the empirical studies, we reviewed the microeconomic literature, which suggests that household consumption patterns are quite stable over the time, but within each category, for instance, food expenditure at home, it can vary significantly. So just an example, households substitute meat for bread. In addition, macroeconomic literature reveals some quantitative change in consumption structure, which confirms the findings of empirical works. So consumption patterns are influenced by the social characteristics of households, which are shaped by the income and employment of consumption members. We present aggregate data on the dynamics of income and employment during each crisis. So, and here we compare three periods: pre-crisis period to crisis, post-crisis period to crisis, and post-crisis period to pre-crisis. What can be seen from the pictures? So we can see that 2008 crisis is characterized by a high increase in incomes and high increase in unemployment. 2014 crisis is characterized by falling incomes and stagnation of unemployment. And 2020 crisis is characterized by slight increase in income and slight increase in unemployment rate. To analyze the impact of pandemic, we consider the severity of quarantine restrictions. So to do so, we include dummy variables for each level of quarantine measures, and we basically assess the quarantine restrictions by following the methodology of St. Petersburg Policy Foundation. And here we define three regions with different quarantine measures. So severe or hard quarantine restrictions, medium quarantine restrictions, and soft quarantine restrictions. So we can see the distribution of these restrictions between regions. So 17 regions with hard, 55 regions with medium, and 11 regions with soft quarantine measures. We use data from the household budget survey conducted by Rosstat to assess the impact of each crisis on consumption structure. We use three different subsamples, three different cross-sectional subsamples, and the unit of observation is the household. So subsample for 2008 crisis starts from the first quarter of 2007 to the fourth quarter of 2010. For 2014 crisis from the 2013 to 2016, and for 2020 crisis, for pandemic crisis, starts from the 2019 to 2021. So to increase an accuracy of our estimates, we exclude some statistical outliers, so 0.75 of the wealthiest households and 0.25 of the least wealthiest households. So also in addition, we use cross-sectional sample because open data does not allow us to define the certain household. As for methodology, we use t-test and Kolmogorov-Smirnov test to check the third hypothesis about quantitative change in the structure of consumer expenditures, and to check the hypothesis 1 and 2, we use least squares method, and in regression analysis, we define three comparison periods. So we compare pre-crisis and crisis period, post-crisis and crisis, post-crisis and pre-crisis period. So we basically did this to capture the presence of some recovery dynamics. Just for convenience, we divide independent variables into three different groups. So the first one includes some social characteristic of household, like number of children, educational attainment, age, type of locality. For financial characteristics, we consider household income, and to capture the impact of crisis, we use some dummy variables for 2008 and 2014, and dummy variables for quarantine restrictions for pandemic crisis. Also, I would like to tell you more about the dependent variable, and we see basically 5 different categories, and we have 5 dependent variables. So food expenditures, out of home food expenditures, alcohol expenditures, non-food goods, and services. What can we see from here? That the share of non-food goods includes a wide range of related goods, and the services category includes not only market services, but also some mandatory services such as public transport, such as housing and utilities. So let's move on to the statistical changes in the consumption structure during each crisis, and here we compare the share of each the share of each category before the crisis and after the crisis. So therefore we capture the overall impact of each crisis. So what we can see from here, we can see that Russian households reduced the share of expenditures on alcohol, which does not depend on the crisis. So the share of expenditures on food increases, with exception of 2008 crisis. We can see a quite significant decrease of the share of food out of the home during pandemic crisis, which is basically due to pandemic restrictions. We see a decrease in the share of non-food goods in 2014 crisis, which is primarily due to the ban on some imported goods and depreciation of ruble. And we observe a decrease in 2014 and 2020 crisis. During like in 2014, it's more about falling incomes, and in 2020, it's also the impact of some quarantine restrictions. So on this slide, we can see three different, not different, quite similar models with different specifications. So the difference mainly in the period of comparison. So to check the to check our hypothesis, we consider also three periods, and there is a difference. And each equation includes regional fixed effects and dummy variables to estimate the impact of crisis. We use specification from the lesser study and the basic form of the model. It's basically one of the simplest models, as it does not include prices for specific categories of goods and services, which are in turn endogenous variables. So at the next stages of the work, we would like to complicate our methodology and include prices in the model. So the results of the t-test and Kolmogorov-Smirnov test confirm the results of the statistical analysis and indicate a quantitative change in the consumption structure under the impact of 2008, 2014, and 2020 crisis, which confirms the third hypothesis. In addition, the null hypothesis of the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test of equality of distribution is not accepted, which confirms the quantitative change in consumption patterns. So the slide shows the results of the regression analysis for food expenditures at home, obtained by the least squares methods with robust standard error, considering also seasonality and regional heterogeneity of our data. So what we can see from here, we can see that the regression analysis confirmed the trends identified by the statistical analysis and mainly t-test. Also, the results confirm Engel's law. So as income rises, the share of expenditures on food at home decreases, which may be observed during each crisis. And also, we compare the crises about themselves, and also we can see that the absolute values of beta coefficient of income basically in absolute terms decrease. So for instance, in 2008 we can see that it is more about minus 10.1, and in 2020 it's minus 2.72 percentage point, which indicates a decrease in the income elasticity of food basket, and it basically reflects the growing importance of food at home expenditures. So the comparison of the crisis and post-crisis periods reflects the presence of some recovery dynamics, which is in line with the main conclusions of the study of Beredneva and Ratnikova. Expenditures on food away from home, unlike the food at home, is reduced by household during each crisis due to high income elasticity of this category. The 2008 and 2020 crisis characterized by a decline in the share of out-of-home food expenditures as a result of the crisis, while in the 2014 crisis share was unchanged. So we observed that the increase in household income in the 2008 crisis contributed to an increase in the share of out-of-home food consumption, which changed in the subsequent crisis. So this response may suggest that the importance of eating in restaurants decreased significantly for households in 2014 due to falling incomes, and in 2020 due to quarantine measures. Now let's consider alcohol expenditures, and it's basically the least sensitive category to the crisis. We observe a negative and significant effect in the 2008 and 2014, in contrast to 20 and 20 crisis, where the share of alcohol expenditures slightly increased in regions with severe quarantine measures. So the results suggest that alcohol expenditures during the 20 and 20 crisis was not sensitive to changes in income, while the 2014 crisis contributed to an increase in the share of alcohol expenditures, and 2008 crisis contributed to a decrease of this share. So what also we are interested in, we can see that the impact of beta coefficients of education and income are different, which basically indicates that there is a difference in the response of different factors of households, and it basically means that the educated and affluent groups do not always fully coincide, and their consumer behavior may differ. Now more about non-food expenditures, and the share of non-food expenditures increased in regions with soft quarantine measures and decreased in regions with hard quarantine measures. We refer the increase in the share of non-food expenditures during crisis to the fact that households prefer to invest in real assets and durable goods in response to macroeconomic uncertainty. So, more interestingly, that household income growth during 2008 and 2014 crisis had a negative effect on the share of non-food items in the consumption basket, in contrast to the 20 and 20 crisis, where the negative effect emerged only after the crisis, and it's likely due to like a correction that followed the growth at the beginning of pandemic. And now, the last but not the least, the share of spending on services, which increased in 2008 crisis, significantly fell in 2014, and basically did not recover till the end of 2014 crisis. And also we can see that as the pandemic crisis receded, regions with severe restrictions increase the share of spending on services, which may be related to some pent-up demand, and also here we observe a change in consumption habits as income growth in 2008 and 2014 crisis subsamples reduced the share of services expenditures, and overall effect of income growth during the pandemic show the opposite effect. So we can see that it stimulates spending on services. We attribute such an increase due to indexation of mandatory payments, and they their share of mandatory payments may be increased in the total volume of services. So, and it was like in June of 2020, so in the acute phase of pandemic. The slide showed the main findings of the analysis. So the impact of crisis on the household consumption structure is asymmetric, and we refer to the different nature of the crisis and the different impact on household income and employment. So we observe that there are some evidence for the Engels law in Russian regions, Also, we can see that in some categories there is a change in consumer habits during pandemic crisis. Also, the interesting thing is that the consumption habits of educated people differ uh, f- from the affluent households. So it may be seen in terms of alcohol expenditures and service expenditures. Also, some important facts that basically I didn't comment during my presentation, that consumer behavior tends to recover regardless of the average age of household, and residents of urban agglomerations, so of cities under the impact of crisis, change their consumption habits. So now let's move on to the hypothesis testing, and from here we can see that each hypothesis is confirmed. On the slide you can see the information that the statements that basically confirm this hypothesis, and I would like to focus more on the areas for further research. So the first issue is that we are planning to compare the impact of crisis on consumption patterns for the different population groups. So the main issue, the main problem with this approach is to define the boundaries. So who is considered to be poor, who is considered to be more or less educated, etc. So therefore, the current work examines the basically all households. The second issue that we are going to apply methods that allow us to analyze some sensory data, which will provide more robust estimates for expenditures with a lot of zeros, for instance, expenditures on food outside the home and expenditures on alcohol. So, and the third, we plan to introduce some regional heterogeneity in the impact of shocks, which will also improve the accuracy of our estimates. So, by doing this, we will relax the quite strict assumption that the crisis affected all Russian regions equally and with the same dynamics. So, thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to listen to your suggestions and comments.
Thank you very much, Valentin, for so interesting presentation. May I start with question and remarks? Could you return to the slide number 13? If I'm not wrong, about alcohol. Thank you very much. Look at the bars devoted to alcohol. The middle bar without minus, is this errata or it's necessary to picture this bar in the right?
So basically, it is just a mistype. So,
It's mistake.
yeah.
It's really very interesting for you how to explain. For me, it was unusual how to explain decrease in the share of alcohol consumption during all crisis. I understand maybe people drink more cheap alcohol of low quality, and that's why expenditures also decrease. How do you think?
Yeah, thank you for a very interesting question. And for me, it was also quite an interesting issue. So, yeah, the first point is that, of course, there is a substitution for more cheap alcohol, for more cheap drinks, but the issue is that we basically can see it on the aggregate level. So we don't know about certain households what's going on in the structure of their alcohol expenditures. So, and this is basically the issue. Yeah, but the first thing is, of course, the substitution for more cheap drinks, and The second issue for me, it's quite interesting because I studied a lot of literature which concerns not only, for instance, pandemic, but also different crises. And so if we analyze like some I would say European or UK or US literature, we will see that there is a consensus about that alcohol is a coping tool. So it is like it's the mechanism to somehow deal with crisis. But the issue is if we consider some Russian studies about Russia, we may see that authors stated a decrease in their expenditures on alcohol during each crisis, and there is some divergence in terms of consumption habits. And also in this paper, I point out that uh, the, the the Russian households are very differs basically from the households from different countries. So we basically find some evidence about the presence of this divergence. So
Thank you. You told about difference for different households, and really, could you return to the results of regression estimates for alcohol? If I remember, yes, with growth in income of households, we can see that coefficient is positive. So the richer the household, the higher the share of alcohol consumption. Yes, and I think it's a plausible idea at the end of your presentation for future research to split all households in several groups, different maybe in ages, maybe in number of children, and in income level. And maybe we can receive different results, not only about alcohol, but maybe in other types of consumption. How do you think?
yeah, I think basically we may, and we have to do it because like such aggregate analysis does not provide insights into how the response of household are redistributed across different socioeconomic groups. So, and basically that is the main question, because here we are talking basically mostly about all household, and it's like very very averaged estimates. So therefore, yeah, we have to at least try to divide them into different groups and see what is the response of each group.
Thank you. Thank you. Please ask the questions or comments. I guess it's the beginning of this research, so I guess your comments and proposals how to develop this research are very welcome. So please, questions, comments.
Well, I have a couple of questions. The first one is about the previous studies. I just wonder whether in the international or Russian literature there were models that used, for example, all these types of household expenditures on the right side of the equation. I just think that if you consider shares, that then these expenditures can redistribute across different categories, and I wonder if anyone has considered that or dealt with that previously.
Basically, the study of Kurineva and Bratnikova consider also shares. They basically use more, I would say, sophisticated approach with Q8's family models and working lesson models, but the overall idea was to assess the impact of some socioeconomic characteristics. As far as I remember, it was income, it was type of locality, maybe number of children. So on the it was not like the full consumption structure as we consider. So, and for us, it's basically more about novelty for the study, but they consider different categories and quite small categories. For instance, expenditures on meat, expenditures on bread, and some other expenditures. So they have a lot of also like regressions, a lot of estimates, and we basically follow in the baseline our model. We follow we follow their approach.
I see. And the second question is maybe also to Olga Anatolyevna. I wonder whether the quantile regression can work for such data if we would like to split the households in different groups for
I get the point. So the issue in application of quantile regression is that we basically don't know what quantiles will mean for us. So we may try to divide household by decils, as far as I remember, so by 10 percentage groups, but and it will be 10 percentage groups in terms of the share of different category. But what it show for us? So we basically don't know, because if we consider, for instance, the food expenditures, food at home expenditures, so we may say that, for instance, the lowest food expenditures, the richer, the more affluent the household. But we have to, in such a way, provide some very strong and empirical evidence that it's true. So basically, therefore, we think about not only dividing in terms of quantiles, but more about defining and dividing household groups in terms of their socioeconomic characteristics, such as income level, such as number of children, such as, for instance, age of household, and different characteristics. So my answer will be that we may try to use quantile regression, and it will divide for us households in different groups, but we don't know basically what how to interpret these results.
May I add, I agree with Valentin, because the dependent variables in these models are shares of expenditures, and it's really difficult to understand the results of quantile regressions. If Valentin maybe in future will estimate models with expenditures per household, per capita, maybe not with shares as the dependent variables. In this case, it's possible to interpret the results of quantile regression estimates, but not in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. That it would probably be another paper.
Yeah.
So
Fully agree with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yeah.
Please, other questions or comments? If we have no other questions or comments, as I know, Valentin is planning to present this research in several scientific conferences. Is this right, Valentin?
Yes.
Then we wish you success in these conferences. Good luck with your presentation and collect proposals of other colleagues in these conferences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Then we can finish our meeting today, and hope to see all of you 2 or 3 weeks. Our next presenter, Alina Urazbaeva. And as usually, Artem send you information about this presentation. Thank you both to Valentin and all participants on today's meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention.